Hey everybody, we're back with yet another cold hardy citrus taste test. And this one is an exciting one because we have the US-852 Citrandarin and one of its parents for a side-by-side comparison here, the Changsha. So now the Changsha Mandarin and a large flower trifoliate were crossed, and the resulting fruit is the US-852. Now this was developed as a rootstock, but of course, like many of the rootstocks, eventually someone decided to see what the fruit quality was like, and what do you know, this makes a half-decent hardy mandarin type of fruit. So this is really cool because we get a direct comparison between these fruit, and this actually serves as a good explanation for some of the effects and some of the changes that occur when we cross normal citrus with trifoliate orange. So this is 50% trifoliate orange and 50% Changsha Mandarin. And this fruit here is 100% Changsha Mandarin. So to start off the test here, we're just going to get some weights on these fruit. You could tell already visually too, they look very similar and very different at the same time. I mean, in terms of coloring and size approximately, they're very similar. But you can tell just from the profiles of the fruit, the Changsha is more squat, and trifoliate oranges are actually rounder, although smaller than both of these. It seems the US-852 kind of mixed the two, so you have this actually really attractive, smooth, round fruit here. Coloration-wise, they're pretty similar. It does seem like US-852 is capable of getting a bit darker. So let's get a little weigh in here. So our Changsha comes in about 89 grams. So that's like a medium fruit. And our US-852 comes in at 101 grams. So also a medium fruit, but a little larger medium fruit. And both of these, I do believe, from the sample sizes that we had, are typical sizing for these fruit. So neither of these are particularly large or small for that variety. So we could get into zest next, just before we cut these up. Now, obviously comparing citrus, I mean, both of these are hardy. Changshas, I mean, I've heard mixed reports. Some people have had these survive surprisingly low temperatures. But let's just say, for now, that these can safely handle down to the low teens. So maybe that 10 to 15 degree range, whereas the US-852 can handle down to single digits and has even been reported to survive as low as 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So a pretty big difference in hardiness there, but of course that does mean there's going to be some trifoliate influence, which is one of the metrics we have. It's inevitable when you trade off for that much hardiness. There's going to be some sacrifices here, but I'm fully expecting this to be a dessert quality fruit here. So just getting the zest, and we'll give that a smell. And you know what's funny? The Changsha, compared to like a Satsuma, has a skunkier smell to it. That's probably the best way to describe it. It has like a weird smell mixed with mandarin. It's like skunk and mandarin. It's kind of strange coming from the peel. But in terms of the zest, it's not bad actually. It's not too bitter. It has a slight bitterness, a little more mandarin flavor, and a little less skunkiness when you taste it. But I'd say it's at least medium quality. You could certainly use that if you were looking to use like an orange or mandarin zest in something. And for the US-852, a little tougher rind already. We'll give that a smell. Yeah, and right away we're getting more trifoliate smell with that. You do still get mandarin, but that's very much like mandarin and trifoliate, so you kind of get those floral notes. And as for the zest, yeah, it has quite a bit more bitterness. At first it's not bad, but once it kind of sits, you do get a bit of bitterness there. I'd say it's low quality. It's not the lowest. It certainly still could be used, but it's a little more limited. I do think, and I have made a marmalade with US-852. The only thing is the peels do need to be processed a little bit more, kind of like you would with a sour orange marmalade anyway, just because of that bitterness in it. But without doing anything to it, just making the marmalade straight up, it was actually pretty good. So with further processing and reducing the bitterness in the peels, US-852 I can say I have tried. It does make a good marmalade fruit, just to get it out there. Okay, so now let's get into some cutting of these fruit. And we could see those cross sections. I mean, also I know right off the bat, Changsha is very easy to peel. We could just write that down now. Whoops, Changsha. Easy to peel. It's not as much of, what am I even writing here? It's not as much of like a zipper peel as some of the Satsumas or even like the 10-degree tangerine. Those just come right off without any effort. This does take a little bit more picking, but it's loose, it's ready to come off. As for the US-852, a lot harder to peel. I mean, if you give it a head start, you can kind of make some progress there, but it's fairly difficult. Alright, so now we can continue cutting these, starting with the Changsha. Now, this is from Stan's farm, both of these fruit, and he did say this was supposed to be a seedless Changsha. However, and wow, they are juicy, let me tell you that. However, I think when they're open pollinated and it's cross pollinating with like the Satsuma and other fruit nearby, we did get a few seeds. Ooh, wow. Yeah, I love the smell of this cut open. I gotta say, I didn't expect to like Changsha as much as I did. This was my first year trying one. Prior to this, I've only been used to the Satsumas, but I really like these. I mean, that aroma that hits you once you cut it or once you peel it, a lot better than just the zest itself. And the flavor is really good. We're gonna get into that. But so that's the Changsha. Now let's look at the cross section, basically of its offspring here. This is like a little father and son comparison, mother and daughter. I'm not quite sure. And there is our US-852. Now obviously you could tell this fruit isn't fully colored up, but I wasn't able to tell much of a difference at this stage as opposed to a later stage. And I do think the interior color for the most part is pretty much the same. It might get a little bit darker, but still you can see there's a pretty great contrast in the colors of the insides here. So you can see while they are similar, that trifoliate influence is great enough to change the size and shape and the color, a lot of aspects of the fruit here. So in terms of juiciness, this is probably actually more of like a medium low on the scale for the US-852. Whereas that Changsha was very juicy. That's going to be near the top of the scale. In terms of seeds, it only has a few, like very few. And as for our US-852, I mean, it has a lot of seeds in there. Just going to put a lot. Like, not as much as a trifoliate orange, but quite a bit more than the Changsha, as you can see here, side by side. So now, there is nothing left to do besides taste these. I think I'm going to go with the tastier one first. So we'll get some of that Changsha. And I could just eat the slice, but I mean, this peels apart so easy. I could just take out little pieces like that. So very nice, of course. Let's give this a try. That's very good. I want to say the Changsha is perfectly balanced when it comes to sweetness and acidity. At least these ones we're having. I mean, they're really, really good. Yeah. Very sweet. Acidity is moderate. I'm going to say slash like, I have a bad habit of doing this. So, acidity is kind of moderate or balanced with the Changsha. It's very sweet. Got a lot of sugar in there, or at least it feels like it does. Maybe it's because it's not overly acidic, but that is very tasty. In terms of bitterness, I didn't perceive any. Trifoliateness, trifoliate influence, there's none. There is no trifoliate in it. Edibility it's perfectly edible. It's dessert quality. I think this is going to rank really high on our scale. Now, I'm thinking back to like the Karaji Mandarin we tasted, and that fruit might have held up against the Changsha maybe if it was riper and had more sugar and acid to it. But this may rank at the top of our scale for the time being until we try some riper fruit of some other varieties. We will be reviewing 10 Degree Tangerine and Satsuma soon too, but I want to say this is my favorite out of all of them. We'll kind of get into that stuff in the other video. But yeah, flavor, it's a delicious mandarin. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not overly complex or different in any crazy way. Let me just give this another bite to make sure. Yeah, it's just a mandarin, really. But each mandarin has a slightly different taste, of course, and, you know, comparing like a clementine to a tangerine in the store, and you get all these different varieties that have slightly different tastes, but they're all good. They all have that mandarin flavor, so I'm going to finish this, and then we'll get into the US-852. Yeah, that was delicious. So very, very happy with Changsha as well. I could eat an entire bowl of those, not even kidding. So, let's get a palate cleanse, and then we'll get into this one. And it's almost not fair comparing these fruit this way, but it just gives you some interesting insight into how these fruit change. So, whenever you hybridize with trifoliate, you always get results that are kind of along these lines. You might get certain selections that are more biased towards the true citrus, and you might be able to backcross, or you might have the second generation seedlings that might have a little different qualities, also tending more towards the true citrus as opposed to the, you know, trifoliate or the poncerus. It's very interesting kind of seeing this here. So anyways, let's get into our US-852 here, and we'll try not to judge it too harshly after having that delicious Changsha. Like with a lot of the other hardy hybrids. Oh, I cut a seed, that's okay. Trying to save as many of these as I can at least, because I do want to grow them out and see. Yeah, it's interesting when you cut it. Obviously, it still has that trifoliate smell. If I kind of compare these. This smells pretty good for what it is. Citrandarins smell good compared to a lot of the hardy citrus, because they do still retain a lot of those mandarin aspects. Obviously, they don't smell as good as a normal Changsha, but it holds its own pretty well. Like, if I didn't have this fruit here and I was just trying this, it would probably feel a lot better, at least. But it looks pretty good inside, so we'll give that a bite. And we'll go for just one more there. Pretty sour right off the bat. That's obviously a big difference. But it's not bad. What I like about US-852, it doesn't have any bitterness that lingers. I don't know if it has much at all. I'll take another bite and see, but in terms of acidity there, it's very sour, of course. Flavor is almost like lemon mandarin, or mandarin lemon, however you look at it. It might have some floral notes. Obviously, you do taste like that hint of trifoliate in there, but it's not bad. And what I notice with not only trifoliate orange, but maybe a little bit in US-852, is some of the orange flavor you get doesn't taste like a navel orange. It tastes like Tropicana orange juice orange. Like it tastes more refined and more specific to that like store-bought juice. It's hard to describe, but it doesn't taste like a fresh eating orange. Some of those orange flavors you might get. Yeah. It might have, I don't know if I want to call that floral or herbal. Maybe more along the lines of herbal. I had a hard time describing this the first time, and the best I could say is like it was a peculiar mandarin taste. Because it is. It doesn't taste like the Changsha. But again, trying it on its own, and just imagining if this was like a separate species. I mean, genetically it is quite different now, having that trifoliate in it. It wouldn't be so bad if you looked at it that way. Like judged on its own terms. That's often how you have to look at some of these, but yeah, it's very much like lemon, mandarin, and I'm gonna put like it has some herbal notes. Kind of similar to Citramon, but to a greater degree. So Citramon, the lemon trifoliate hybrid, has mostly just a lemon taste, teeny bit of trifoliate, but mostly that comes out as like an herbal taste. It has a little herbal, maybe rosemary-ish background. That's what it kind of reminds me of with this, to a greater degree. It has something herbal in it that kind of changes it, maybe a little more in the aftertaste than the like forward taste. It's not bad though, it's interesting, it's different, and some people might not like that. Kind of similar with the Citramon, though I found it more agreeable. This is a more polarizing fruit, though, where people who are used to this and like this, they might not like this. And it depends. If you like sour citrus, though, a little easier to convince you. I like sour citrus, so something that tastes like a lemon and roughly like a mandarin, maybe has some herbal notes, hey, that's great. And I can say this makes not only a good juice, you sweeten this with a little sugar and water, you make a citrusade with the US-852. It tastes really good. It makes a really good orange juice. And marmalade-wise, like I mentioned, the marmalade's good too. So processing-wise, this is a useful fruit. Most people might just not be biting into this fresh. So I will say fairly edible, maybe? Something along those lines. Trifoliate influence is probably somewhere around moderate. Can't tell quite if it's on the low end of moderate or not. Might just go in for one more on this. Sometimes it's needed to really figure these out. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with moderate. It's not high. That's the thing. It's very much, it's much more edible. Like if this was a trifoliate orange, I think it would be a lot more approachable to people. Like I could see this growing in the wild and being like a wild orange. So it's pretty cool. Bitterness, I'm gonna say like very low, if any, like hardly perceivable. It's mostly just sour. But yeah, that aroma, it's kind of, and we'll describe it, but it's kind of that mandarin, like floral. I don't know if I get pine notes in there. Yeah, not necessarily piney, it's just kind of like an oddly floral mandarin smell. And I think I meant to mention for the Changsha, it just smells like a mandarin, but kind of has those skunky notes like we mentioned. You don't get that skunkiness actually with the US-852. That's kind of funny, because that is something different about the Changsha compared to other mandarins, is that skunkiness, whereas the US-852 just has some other oddities to it that the Changsha doesn't. So that's pretty interesting. Both of these fruit, with the exception of fresh eating for the Changsha, can be used for juice, marmalade, all sorts of other processing. Yeah, juice, marmalade, fresh eating. I guess you could make desserts with this too if you wanted to make like something orange creamsicle. We've done that with the Changsha, but probably could get away with it with the US-852. That would definitely be very interesting for that fruit there. But I do specify too when a fruit is good for marmalade and not just jelly, because that means the rind is usable. Some of these hardy citrus, if I say jelly instead of marmalade, that means the rind is simply too bitter to include in preserves. In my opinion, you could try processing it. I've tried and it just doesn't feel worth my time. So it is either a jelly or a marmalade, and that's kind of how we determine it. Just in case anybody was wondering and going forward, that's a big factor for that. So now we're right at the ends here. We're going to get some pH tests, let these sit, and then we'll get some Brix readings on these fruit. I'm actually curious where Changsha will measure and whether or not this strip will accurately tell me that too. Okay, so there's that, and now get our US-852 juice on there. And you know what, that is interesting. They seem to be working, and you can tell right off the bat now, those are colored pretty differently. And assuming this is mostly where it's going to be, we can tell that our Citrandarin is reading around a 3, and our Changsha looks to be reading closer to a 4. Maybe between a 3 and a 4. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Changsha read like a 3.5, close to 4, something like that. It's definitely more than the US-852 though. The US-852 is probably in the sub 3 pH range, so fairly acidic there. Let's get some Brix readings too. Just for curiosity's sake, we have noticed with some of these fruit, some of the hardy hybrids are reading fairly high Brix, but because of the resin contents in the fruit. But that's something I should specify. The US-852 is one of those hardy hybrids that doesn't have any sticky resin. Handling this fruit, cutting it, eating it, you know, I ate it right down to the pith and the rind. No bitterness, no resin, which are huge pluses for it. So kind of one of the only two things holding the US-852 back. One, obviously, it's very seedy, and, well, 3 things maybe, and fairly sour for a lot of people. But the other thing is the flavor is hard to distinguish and maybe not as enjoyable as a lot of other mandarins. It just has an odd flavor to describe. And I'm glad at least I could kind of articulate it a little more this time and say it's perhaps a bit herbal, and hopefully that helps. But if you can imagine that flavor combination, It's not quite as approachable to most audiences as just a plain old Mandarin. So just interesting to see that. Anyways, let's get the bricks going. All right, nice clear juice. And let's see for our Changsha. Nice, we are reading literally a hair above 10, basically a 10 on the bricks. Oh, and we'll say kind of, I'm guessing around a 3.5, but we'll see what it actually is. We'll say less than 3. Now, we'll wipe this off and get a bricks reading for the US-852. I do believe it should still have a decent sugar content. And it might read lower than some of the other hardy citrus just because of that lack of resin in the fruit. Alrighty. Very nice. So this one is probably clocking in just around 11.5. So it kind of confirms my suspicions about these. Though this makes a lot more sense than some other readings we've gotten. But basically the US-852 has a higher bricks, which may or may not be solely related to the sugars, but I do believe there's probably other solids in here affecting that reading. However, let's say even it's just the sugars, it also read as being a lot more acidic than the Changsha. And I can taste that difference very clearly as well. This is much more acidic, so even if these had the same sugar content, it's a lot harder to tell with the US-852 because of that. But because the Changsha is lower acid, we're able to perceive those sugars a little bit clearer. But anyway, I think that's mostly it for our comparison here. Again, it's interesting to see this difference, and hopefully you guys find this just as interesting too. Maybe you didn't even know that US-852 was a Changsha hybrid, but it's really interesting to see these comparisons, and maybe in some future episodes, I might try this with a couple other fruit. I think we have a Troyer Citrange, so I could always show you that next to a navel orange, and well, that's a pretty drastic one, I'll tell you that much. I don't even have to taste test the navel orange to tell you the outcome of that one. But we can offer a lot of interesting comparisons like that. But here you have it. That is what it looks like when you cross a Mandarin with a trifoliate orange. And I'm looking forward to trying a lot more Citrandarins this season. I don't think we'll have the opportunity to retest a US-942 this year. And that's a really popular one, so it's a little unfortunate, but hopefully going into next year, we might get some blooms and fruit set on our trees, and that'd be really exciting. But I know in some coming episodes, we're going to cover some other Citrandarins like the Bishop Citrandarin, which that one is supposed to be, well, it is a variation of US-852. Basically, it's a seedling of US-852 that has double flowers, and that's not a quality that US-852 has. Thus, it appeared to be its own unique Citrandarin. And people have said that the taste of US-852 is superior. I'm sorry, that the taste of the Bishop Citrandarin is superior to the US-852. So we will put that to the test and find out. So I'm very excited for that opportunity. So lots more coming, of course, and more content for you guys to enjoy. Now is a good time for the scores. I almost forgot. So now you will see the final scores laid out here. And we got a pretty good comparison here. I am expecting these to be quite different, but US-852 will probably rank in at least the 40s, if not maybe the 50s. It's a decent hardy citrus for sure. But this Changsha is going to blow it out of the water. It'll probably measure somewhere in the 80s, depending. You know, we're going to add it up and find out, and you will have seen already there. But these fruit are in entirely different tiers of edibility, but also in terms of hardiness. So this is the trade-off. You can grow Changsha in some pretty cold areas, but you're not looking at anything below zone 8 without protection. And even zone 8, you might need protection in a lot of areas too. Whereas US-852, you can push out a zone 7 with this fruit. Not so sure about a zone 6, maybe recently with the warmer winters, but you are still taking some risks once you get down that cold. But again, it appears to be good to around 0 degrees, maybe slightly above that, which is still very, very good for the type of fruit that you're getting. This is quite an improvement over a trifoliate orange. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one as always, and tune into the next one. See you guys then. Bye-bye.